The purpose of this meeting is primarily so we can share some ideas with each other around those holiday considerations. And I just want to first say thank you to everyone who has joined us today. I always love seeing returning names come up on these events that we host monthly, and then always some new names. So just in case that you are joining us for your first time, I do record these Zoom meetings. That way, if someone is not able to join us live and they want to watch it later, they're able to do so. That being said, if you've not watched these before and not joined us before, those are all hosted on our YouTube page. So please feel free to go check those out on the CViConnect YouTube channel. Also, for those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Steffer, and I am the business director and one of the founding teachers of the visually impaired for CViConnect. And so today I'm coming to you from kind of a multi hat wearing, I guess, depending on where you look at it. What I wanted to talk about first is how we're going to participate. I'm guessing at this point in time, most of you have attended your fair share of Zoom meetings, and everyone has their own preference of how to participate in these. And typically I am trying to share something new that's going on or something that I've learned and I want to give you that information, or a question I'm trying to answer for the community that I've recently figured out, or whatever. So I'm trying to share something with you. And today I have kind of some ideas to share, but I'm also hoping that some of you brought some questions or things to share as well. So I was looking for today's meeting to be more of an open meeting where everyone's participating and kind of jumping in. So don't worry, I'm not going to call out everybody and say, it's your turn to talk or what have you. I'm just wondering how everyone wants to join in the conversation and just make sure that everyone feels comfortable doing so. We have about 8 of 9 of us right now that are in the meeting. I think that we can all kind of just unmute and join in the conversation as we want to, and as there are breaks available in the conversation. But if you are not comfortable with that and you'd prefer to just type in your responses, I do have the chat open. And so I am happy to read your responses to the group if that's your preferred way of participating. If for some reason you want to say something, but you don't feel like you can kind of get that natural opportunity to say something, please just either message everybody in the chat and just say, hand raise, or you can even raise your hand, use that icon, and you can actually do that. And I will take a look and make sure everyone's getting a chance to say something. Or you can message me privately in the chat using that drop down and just send it to Steffer. And then I'll be able to kind of help you out from there and make sure I get a chance to let you chime in. Okay. Now I'd love to know who's here with us today. However you want to participate, whether you want to unmute and let us know. I want to know how you are working with individuals with CVI. What's your role? While everyone's kind of getting signed in, I still hear some more people chiming in. I'll tell you guys a little about me. This picture that you guys are seeing on my screen is a picture of my family at the zoo this summer. We have 2 daughters, 8 and 5, and they absolutely love going to the zoo, especially to see the giraffes. So I thought I'd share this picture with you guys. Who would like to tell us a little bit more about themselves? Who's here and what's your role with a child with CVI? So we've got a teacher for the visually impaired in North Dakota, and she is working with students who have CVI in public school settings. Thank you for joining us, Danielle. And we've got Michelle, and her daughter is 13 years old. Very cool. Thank you for joining us. I was hoping we'd have a good variety of people joining us, so that is excellent to see. We've got some family, some educators. We have Hillary joining us, and she is going to listen as much as possible. For those of you who have kiddos, we can all relate to Hillary right now. She is doing her best to multitask as mom and learning from the session. So not to worry, Hillary, we can all relate. And I personally don't mind if there are children in the background, because it just makes me feel like we're all human, and I can relate completely to that. I've joined several of these with my kiddos in the background over the past year or so I can relate completely. Amy is here from the Deaf Blind Project. Welcome, Amy. Christina is here from Northeast Ohio, and she works with a bunch of students in the public school setting that also have CVI. We have another parent whose son is 14 and deafblind. Excellent. For those of you who either work in the Deafblind Project or are a parent of a child who is deafblind, I'm curious, is the auditory loss part of an auditory processing similar to cortical visual impairment where it's a processing issue in the brain, or is the deafness caused by something that is actually physically going on with like either the cochlea or something like that within the ear? Okay, thank you, Martha. She said it's auditory neuropathy. So it just helps because I feel like in a lot of cases, like Amy mentioned, it's auditory processing, and it's just helps because we kind of approach children with deafblindness in a little bit different, just like we do with our ocular loss when we're comparing something physically going on with the eye versus CVI, where we know that there's that potential to continue learning how to process that information. So. Excellent. Well, feel free, again, does anyone else want to unmute and chime in? I don't have to be the only one talking all day. All right, well, I'm going to keep going. So I want to know, what kinds of questions do you have? What concerns do you have that made you want to join this specific Zoom meeting? What was kind of eye-catching for you? What concerns might you have? Is it just that you have ideas that you want to share, which is totally amazing too, but I want to make sure that I kind of get all the questions or things that maybe you came with in your head beforehand so that we can kind of get those out and make sure we address those throughout our time together today. Do you have any specific holiday traditions that you're thinking of, or things that are going on in school or with the family that you want to make sure that you know how to address? Maybe you're concerned about presents. Michelle mentioned it's challenging trying to get new gifts for her. I'm tired of getting baby toys for her. She's 13 and really enjoys lights and music. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Michelle. Amy is sharing that she's looking for ideas to include in her newsletter for families. Excellent. I love it. I'm hoping that together we can kind of brainstorm some ideas and come up with a good gamut of activities. Michelle, your experience is very common, and I hear that a lot. And so I did try to keep that in mind as we made some of those decisions to put into this little slideshow, just because I wanted you guys to have options across that gamut and not things that weren't appropriate. And Jill joined us, and she said that she's a new mom asking for ideas for birthday and Christmas. Excellent. Okay. One more thing that I forgot to ask on the previous slide is for your kiddos that are in CVI. Now I'm guessing for most of the educators, you're kind of covering a gamut of kiddos from phases 1, 2, and 3. For those of you who are family members or parents, can you, if you know the CVI range of your child, like if they're in phase 1, 2, or 3, if you want to either unmute and make that comment, or feel free to drop that in the chat, that would be great. It just kind of gives us a better idea as we're having these conversations where everyone's coming from, because definitely a toy for a kiddo in phase 1 is going to be much different than a toy for a kiddo in phase 3. Sounds like most of us are looking for gift ideas is what I am kind of getting the idea for. Oh, Michelle, please do not apologize. You don't need to have, life is crazy. And you know what? That's just the way it goes as a parent. And so that's just life. I always feel the same way when somebody asks me about my kids. I'm like, I don't know the answer to that question. So that's just life. No need to apologize. All right. So my first thought as a parent is we have a lot of stuff in our house. So I wanted to give you guys an idea of some things that didn't have to be physical gifts, knowing though that some of these things may or may not work for our kiddos because of the level of sensory needs that are also involved. So on the screen, I have things like zoo, the petting zoo. Maybe you do a staycation to a hotel nearby that has a pool. If your kiddos like to swim, the hands-on museum, if there's one in your area, a nature center. Maybe have like a night at the movies type of thing. Like so you're going out, maybe, instead of an aunt or an uncle buying something for the child, maybe they take them out on an outing and go do one of these things. We have a place nearby that has like a reptile encounter near my area, but I've seen those kind of coming up in other areas as well. So I thought I'd throw that on there in case you haven't been to one of those. And actually the reptile encounter in our area came out to the camp that I service in Lapeer, Michigan, and they did an excellent job with our kiddos in making sure that all of the kids, if they wanted to explore and touch the animal, they had an opportunity to do so. But if they weren't as comfortable doing that, they weren't forced to do any of that either. And so I felt like they did a really good job balancing that. There's trampoline parks. Those are really hit and miss because they can be extremely overwhelming sometimes. Bowling, same thing. Memberships to different places. Again, I know that these are very hit and miss just because not knowing what our kiddos need and how they're going to approach that. But if you contact some of the local places, they might be willing to make accommodations with you for your child. I've heard of a number of places, especially local settings, that are more and more willing to kind of help you figure out a way to accommodate it. They might have a set time in their schedule where it's not as chaotic, and that may or may not work with your work schedules. I totally understand that too. When my daughter was younger, she had a lot of sensory processing stuff going on, and so we had to do the headphones for a lot of places like the movies or trampoline parks and things of that nature. And for a friend of ours, they still have to do that. And so it's just very hit and miss. And those sensory friendly times didn't always work out with our work schedules to be able to take our kids to those types of places. So I understand that doesn't always work, but it might be worth looking into if that might work for your family. So just an idea. One bonus with COVID right now is that there's a lot of these places have limited capacity. And so because they're only allowed to let so many people in because of their states or their areas restrictions, that might also be helpful right now for some of our kiddos if your child is healthy enough to be able to go out and do some of these things in the community. Because I also know that your child's health may also play a role in whether or not you're able to do some of these community experience type gifts. Does anyone else have any experiences that they've given or that their family has done with a child that they've really enjoyed? I see Mary has arboretums and gardens are great. Yes, we have one nearby that actually has built in, I'm near University of Michigan's campus. And so they have this great place where the students have actually created this natural fairy garden. And so you can use things that you find on the ground in the woods, and everyone creates their own little fairy garden. And so you create your little fairy home. And it is amazing to see the cool things that kids have come up with, just balancing sticks and rocks against each other. And somebody went through and put some beads on the ground to help kind of decorate it a little bit, and some colorful feathers. So that was a really cool place that my daughter and I went to as like a special event, her and I together. We went, it was unplanned, but super amazing to look through. And a lot of the arboretums have great things that you can kind of check out along the way as well. Same with the nature center. That's another good one that you can check out and see ahead of time if there's somebody that might be able to go along with you. And if you let them know ahead of time that your child has this visual impairment and this deafness, that they might be able to help you figure out other ways for your child to engage in and explore those sensory experiences through touching certain things. They might have examples that they usually have for different shows and whatnot, that your kids might be able to feel and smell and explore in different ways to be a part of those adventures. Someone mentioned, I realized this summer that the aquarium at the beach is heaven sent for him. Bonus, his sister loves it too. Excellent. That is nice when you can do things like that. For me, I just love when we can do things that aren't I mean, I know that every kid wants to open that physical gift and they want to have that toy, and like that's a thing that you want to have. And as a family member too, as an aunt even, I have a hard time giving my niece and nephews experiences, because sometimes I want them to open that physical gift, and that's just part of our routine and our family traditions. But for some of these, it's just something different too for different family members. So it's not everyone is trying to think of toys for their holiday experiences. Jillian, thanks for joining us. I'm going to read your comment really fast. Your son seems to have a diagnosis of CVI. However, he is 24 and is non-mobile. Is there anything I might get him for Christmas? If this is just for young children today, I am happy to move on. I am hoping to cover a good gamut of things, Jillian, but I do have probably more children-based things, but let's go ahead and take a look at this next slide, because there might be a couple things on this next one that you find beneficial, and hopefully you can find something. Oh, Margaret also added that the art museum has a tactile area set up for the visually impaired. Excellent. That's great that your area has that. And Martha has a kids museum near us that the part that he enjoys. Yeah, we had a kids museum out in Kalamazoo that had a great hands-on like section of that museum. And it was great for my students to be able to engage with other peers and things of that nature. We have a great hands-on museum in the area too. There's also air museums and things of that nature. Yes, Martha mentioned too that Autism Night is a great option. Just because it's labeled as Autism Night, I know some places are referring to it more as like a sensory friendly night. And so that's what you're looking for. You're looking for something that might have less going on, if that's what your child needs, because typically in those environments, they limit the number of people. They are working on ways for the sound to be decreased so you have a little bit less going on. And don't forget, when we're looking at things for our kiddos, that we aren't always going to need it to be visually accessible, right? A lot of these experience type things aren't always going to be, we're not going to go about them in a visual way. We might go about them in a tactile or auditory input way, because the vision information just might be way too overwhelming at that point in time. So it's about balancing that and figuring out what works best for your student. Another suggestion from Mary is our children's theater offers events for sensory children that considered less noise at the Dallas Children's Theater. Oh, excellent. I had never thought of that. That's a great idea. Thank you, Mary. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next page, but if you think of any other experience things, continue to throw them in the chat. I think this is excellent that we're all sharing some ideas. So here in this page here are a lot of things that are auditorily accessible. So different things that I wanted to share with you guys that I thought of. I have several ideas, but I just wanted to get a few on here to kind of get the conversation going. The first in the upper left-hand corner is called Hot Dots Talking Pen. And so this is there's a lot of different versions of this from what I understand, some that you can pre-program and some that work with cards. And so it's a fun little interactive game that kids can play with, and it's auditory based as far as when you're touching on it, it'll read it off to you. So I think that's a really cool game to play and to check out. Martha adds that Santa left a note saying he'd be dropping off gifts throughout the year. That way, concerts I didn't know about, we could get tickets throughout the year. That is really cool that Santa did that. Excellent. That's a cool way to do it. Santa's so clever for some of our kids, making sure everybody gets a chance to participate. This next one, the one in the middle that is a black box and has the 5 different colored circles on it, that is from APH. So for those of you who are not familiar, that's the American Printing House. And I have the link underneath there for the product catalog. I'm happy to, if anyone needs it, I can drop it in the chat. But if you are working with your public school, they might be able to help you get some of these products through what we call federal quota funds. There is an eligibility criteria and things of that nature. So you have to work through your local school district to find out if your student is eligible and if they qualify for some of these things. But you can still purchase it if your student does not qualify through the school system. You could purchase it outside. But what's really cool about this is that you can use this as a personal music player. You can use it with a the APH sensory learning kit has, what is that? The Power Link. And you can use that for switches if you need to have another accessibility pattern, or if your student can manage multiple buttons, you could have the different buttons that are displayed here. But what's really cool is you can play audio files like books, and you can play music files. So pretty much WAV and MP3 files, I believe. And as long as they're on an SD card, a USB flash drive. And then I want to say it also accepts that blue section there when you slide it in. I think it also takes the digital talking book cartridges as well. So just another opportunity for your child to potentially independently access some of those things, and have that chance to just listen to music on their own or listen to a book on their own, and have that to play with. On the far right, we have Bop It. There's lots of different versions of Bop It now, but I've had several of my students who just really enjoy that. When they were younger, we might start off with me doing 2 of the buttons and them only doing 1 of the buttons, whichever the sound they liked. And so we kind of worked together, and then slowly as they got older, they might manage more and more of the toy and figuring it all out. But I've had a lot of kids that really enjoyed that. Or if motorically they couldn't do the twist because of their hand, depending on like CP or whatever diagnosis they may have. But if they could hold on to the blue one and pull with me, or just bang the Bop It in the middle, and I would do the 2 ends, that worked sometimes. I always liked bringing that in and playing that as something fun that for some of my students, they really enjoyed that. And so that was like a reward after we did some of our work, we might play Bop It. So that's an idea for some of your kiddos. Feel free to drop in the chat if you have any other toys that you've enjoyed that make noise, or that your kids really enjoy, because this are just some general ideas. And for some of you, none of these might work, but for some of you, all of these might work. So you just never know. It's really about what that kid is interested in, right? My girls right now are super into playing sports and doing things with their friends. And so I added 2 different balls that are on here. The one on the left that's red is a beep ball, and the one on the right is a goal ball, which has the bells in it. So the one on the left, you would actually plug into the wall to charge, and then it has a button inside that little hole that you push, and then it's going to have a constant beeping. So as it's rolling around, it's just making this really loud beep, beep sound over and over. I'm not going to continue making that noise because you get the idea. The bell ball on the right, though, has to be moving in order for you. So as the ball comes to a stop, it's not going to continue making noise. That is for the game of goal ball. And so that is actually, if you're, playing, rolling the ball back and forth, you could do that inside with the one with the bells inside of it. But the one on the left, I would prefer that to be, if it were me, I would have that outside because of how loud it is. And it just kind of like reverberates off of the walls, and it can get really loud. So if it's outside, it might not be as overly stimulating, but it's a great way to engage in some activities. And even for our kids who are not ambulatory, they can get out, they can either participate in their wheelchairs moving around, or get down. And if they have the arm movement to maybe crawl and move around, they could do that. They can kind of scooch themselves along and play in the grass and find the ball and roll it and move it. And you guys can kind of play lots of games with just generic balls that have that access point for them to continue hearing it and knowing where that item is at. Michelle mentions that they do hand over hand to play Simon. That's an excellent game as well. Some of the students that we work with, might even be able to see those lights enough to be able to play that independently, depending on where they're at. Again, it's hard to say because we don't have like a set age that we're talking about or a set CVI phase, covering a lot of kids here. We've got another, Mary has sensory boxes with items that they unwrap to build a story, like a snowman. Oh, I like that. Nice idea, Mary. I hadn't thought about that. Some other musical or sound making things that you can get are musical instruments. They've got lots of things that, you know, the maracas that you shake, or those different kits and things like that that are easy to hold on to usually, or that you can get an adaptive elastic that kind of goes around the individual's hand. So that way, even if they can't physically grab on with their thumb and kind of get a good hold on the item, if you have that adaptive elastic around the back of it, and just kind of helps them hold it so that if their hand goes, the toy doesn't also go flying across your house. I did not find a picture of it, but one of my students has a music cube, and it's pretty white all around. It doesn't have a lot of colors on it, except for each button on the side of the cubes has a circle that is a solid color, and then the picture on the inside is the same color. So when you're looking at the one side, you have just a circle and that image on each side of the cube. And so each side is a different color. But for some of my students, they're not really participating in that visually. They're just, you know, as they're turning away, they might be tapping on it and rotating it around and hitting the different musical sounds to listen to. But it is nice that it is a little bit less complex. So if they were to bring their vision over, it could be manageable for them. One of my students used to love Beepo. My own two kids loved Beepo. And I've seen a couple of parents who have, I don't know how this part works, but they've rigged it to make it switch accessible. So instead of having a switch hit Beepo's belly, that you can rewire it so it hooks up to your switch. Now, I don't know how to do that, but I'm guessing there's probably somewhere that you could Google that and some directions would pop up for you and how to make that toy switch accessible, or maybe you can even purchase it like that. Additionally, I mentioned that with that black player in the middle there, the Joy player, that you could listen to books, but even just physical copies of books. Remember that even though every picture is not accessible, that doesn't mean we want to limit the amount of literacy we're exposing to our kids. Reading to our children is amazing, regardless of how old they are. They can be listening to a story is still literacy, and it's still exposing them to a lot. And so I would find something that is within their interest zone and maybe get a book, and maybe they make that a special time between whomever is giving it to them and the child, so they can kind of share that. I mean, that's just the teacher in me. I love books. And when my kids will let me read with them, it's one of my favorites. So just something to think about as well. Okay. Oops. I lost my presentation. Where'd it go? Okay. All right. The next area that I have, I tried to cluster some of these together, and I kind of put some of these in fine motor-ish areas, some of these accessible toys here. On the top left-hand side are squigs. And so they just suction cup together. And so even for my students who don't have that bilateral hand movement to put something together, they could either pull them off the table. I have a lot of kids who are super strong and being able to just rip things off the table, and they make this cool popping sound, which the kids really enjoy. And if you have accommodated, like if you have a white table or even like a dark table, those bright colors really pop off. And so it just makes it really easy for the kids to just pull them right off. And then as they advance, you can kind of connect them together. Those are actually really cool in the bathtub too. So if your kids are still bath age and you're looking for something in there, because they're so vibrant, you could put just one color in there. You could put all the colors in there, depending on what is within your child's means. So on the right, I have those tactile matching eggs. That is a younger kid toy, but it is really cool because you don't have to use your vision, but the visual cue that the two colors line up and match is really nice. So if they are using their vision to participate in that activity, it gives them that little bit of a hint. but you could even just open one or two at a time, and having that, again, that bilateral hand movement of working together to try to like snap them in place, if that's something that's within their means that they're working on. This next one that's down on the left-hand corner, you see the two kids holding a string, and they have like two pieces in their hands. That's called a zing ball. And I've worked with it before, where we might have an adult on one end and the child on the other. If they're able to kind of like open and close, the ball swings it back and forth. You kind of like pass it back and forth to each other by opening and closing it. We've also had it so you've had maybe like up here on the other side, and then the child's on your child holding it on the other end. If your child's not able to do both hands, you could have one hand or the other. So maybe they're just holding one part of it, and so another person is holding the other one. So they're working together as a team to pull those in and out. And I just love that, because I'm all about, I mean, I know that in this picture it shows it with just two kids, but I love the idea of different ways to integrate the activities with peers or siblings. And so it kind of become a multi-person event as well. And then before I say this last one down here, please, again, feel free to type in the chat and add some other ideas that you have as far as fine motor things. I've got some more on the next page as well, but on the bottom right-hand side, there's this little train there, but there are a ton of different things like this. This is a switch adapted toy. And so if you just Google switch adapted toy, you can find a lot. Now, some of them can be pricey. I have seen some parents, though, starting to create their own Etsy shops where they're switch adapting stuff for their kids, and they're realizing that, hey, there's a need out here for this group of kids that need things that can be switch accessible. And so I believe, in fact, this steam train, it lights up, you put bubbles in it, so there's bubbles that fly out as the kid touches the button. As they hold it down, it continues to move and the bubbles pop up, and if they let go of their switch, it stops moving the train and the bubbles stop coming out. So it's really nice for that purpose. But like I said, I believe this one was on Etsy, and there are lots of other families that are doing things similarly. So again, if you just do a Google search or whatever you want to, wherever you want to search, and look for switch adapted toys, they're not as pricey as they once were. So that might be an idea for you. I was trying to be, reasonable, because I know how expensive this time of year can get for our families. For me, let's be honest, it just insane when you have to buy for this many kids. We have a big family. The next thing I listed, but I don't have pictures of, are just different items for dramatic play. You've got your play animals, dolls, foods, cleanup kits, things of that nature. Dramatic play is really, really cool for just child development. I have that early childhood background in me, but it's also just a really nice way to allow kids to just let their imagination run wild. And even if they don't have that communication skill, they're not verbally speaking to you, does not mean that they're not communicating. I think you all already know that, but just because we don't hear them having the animals talk back and forth doesn't mean that it's not enjoyable for them. And so that would be an option if you haven't tried those types of things yet. Maybe introduce them. There are a lot of local libraries that have really cool kits like this, and the musical sets, where you can loan them out and get an idea if it's something that your child is interested in before going to purchase anything like that too. So I think kids will really surprise you about the things that interest them. I think sometimes we think so deeply about how specialized something might have to be. And I think this next page will actually give us some really good examples of how sometimes things that we can see at the store might just work just fine. So this page includes the rainbow scratch kits. And so I had a lot of kids that I'm starting to see more and more kids into phase 3, which is really exciting. And I have one who loves to draw, and she'll just draw on like plain white paper with her pencil or what have you. But my kids love the way that this kind of gets like a shiny and reflective aspect when you're coloring on it as well. My 5-year-old, when we first started having these in our home, it was just scribbles, and she would just keep going back and forth until the whole thing was like just this rainbow of color all over the place. And so it doesn't, I mean, I can't draw a whale like they're showing in this picture, so I'm not expecting our kids to draw these elaborate scenes, although if they can, like, more power to them, that's amazing. But I'm just saying, like, it doesn't have to be used for that specific purpose. It could be for maybe you're teaching sight words in your classroom and you want to use this to add an element of it. Now, keep in mind, that's a lot of colors. And for some of our kids, that might be like, boop, gone, I'm done. I can't do it. It's way too much going on. But for some, because of that reflectiveness, because it does have a little bit of a, can't think of the word, little shimmery, glittery effect. I can't think of the right word. Anyway, it has that, kind of movement like property because of that shine that when you hit it. So they might be interested in that if they can tolerate the number of colors on there. What I don't know is if they make those with only a solid color in the background, because that would be really cool too if they had that shimmer effect with just a solid color. But I have not seen those yet. So on the bottom left-hand corner, I have the dice set. For what I've done in the past, I just take like a plastic storage, like a food storage container that I can see through. And we just shake it and drop it down, or the kids can kind of throw it and drop it down, and whatever. We can have 1 dice, 2 dice. We can continue to change how many are in there. And that allows them a way to integrate with any board games that have dice that are involved with it. So maybe you're playing Sorry, or maybe you're playing some other game. This could be a way that your child is participating in those types of games as families. My family loves to play games together. And so I've also added Corkle on here. What I've done with some students in the past is remove some of the shapes. And so it's not as much of a choice. For those of you who have never seen Corkle, it's got these wood tiles with all the different colors and shapes on it. And so it works very much like when you play dominoes. And so you're trying to line them up and either match the color and the shape. You can change the rules up and make it so that you have to match both. You may make it so you only have to match one or the other, kind of like an Uno. But I think it's a great tool to have in your pocket, and a great way for, like, again, the family to play, or a game that they can play with peers. And it doesn't require a whole lot of adaptation because it already has a black background and very bright colors on those wooden blocks. How many of you guys play family games and things at home? Or anyone else big board game families? My daughter is a huge fan of Spot It right now, and I saw that being played in the classroom and was really cool. In fact, I believe Diane Sheeline mentioned that she was playing with some students and just kind of made an adapted version on the computer. And so they had a separate option available there. And then I had a teacher who was using it in the classroom. They were playing an auditory version of Spot It, which was really cool to see. Connect 4 is a great one. Shut the Box is another really good one. So that is the game where you have the numbers from 0 to 9, and you have to roll 2 dice. Again, you can either physically roll them or use like an adaptive way. So they're just throwing the box, and whatever it lands on, it lands on. Or there's the electronic spinners that you can get online. And so you could just type in the 2 choices, and if they can tap the iPad screen or what have you, they would be able to make their spinner go. And so you could have the set game choices based on whatever game it is that you're playing. So if you're whatever type of board game you might be playing. So, but anyway, with Shut the Box, it's a great game if they're working on like adding and things of that nature, if they're ready for that. Or they could just mark down if they can count. That's a great game too. So what it is let's say I rolled a 1 and a 4, then I would mark down the numbers 1 and 4. Now, higher level thinking, those added together make 5. So I could also put down 2 and 3. Now that's a little bit more tricky, but if your student is ready for that and can kind of problem solve through that, that would be another great game for them to play. Again, adaptive and super easy for them to have access to. You could even use tactile dice if you prefer. Those are available and pretty easy to get to. Michelle mentioned that it's difficult to play the board games because of her daughter having the delays, and that's totally understandable. I wanted to make sure we hit that gamut of different skills. So hopefully some of the other things that we've mentioned would be accessible for your daughter, Michelle. And then Mary Ann says Quirkle, cool. It's a really nice game. I like it a lot. Here are some more that might be a little bit more versatile depending on your student's needs or your child's needs. These are all light-based. And so in the top left-hand corner are they're called light stacks. And this is really cool. Let me actually take you to their site. Oops, that's not the right site. Hold on, let me drag over to the correct screen so you guys can see this. So this light stacks site, they have some basic starter sets. And it's really cool. They're just like Legos, but they have the light shining all the way through them. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then they have different extension sets from there. I actually don't know how much these range though. I don't know how much they cost. I wonder if I wasn't able to find that when I looked earlier. So I don't know if anyone has these or if Lego sells them separately. If that's an option either, I'm not really sure. So if anyone has experience with those, I'd love to hear more about them. But this in the middle, I want so bad for my family and then I'm just going to steal it and take for my students. But it is the glow in the dark mini golf. And what's really cool is that you can eliminate some of these. So you don't have to have it set up as crazy and insane as they do right now, but you could create your own obstacles together. And so I think that would be a great way as a family that everyone maybe sets up one piece. So maybe one person puts the hole down and somebody else puts the different pieces out there, or maybe you decide you're only going to have just the hole out there and you kind of like outline it with pool noodles so that the ball doesn't roll all over your house. I don't know if this board that is on there, it looks like it comes with it for that parameter, so you wouldn't have to use pool noodles, but I have never used it before. And I saw this and thought that would be really fun to play as something that it's lit and it's going to get our attention. So that's really cool for those who could access that visually. And it would be, again, something fun for the whole family. On the bottom right-hand side, you'll see I have a light box, and then above it, I have the Magna Tiles. I know a lot of kids who love these Magna Tiles, and they have continued to make extension kits galore. So the older your child is, you might be able to get more in-depth kits that actually have directions, kind of like Legos, that tell you how to make different pieces. But just basic exploration for some of the younger kids. We have, you could put them on the light box if you want to have more visual input on it, but you don't have to. We have Magna Tiles here, just a small like basic set, and my kids are constantly running out of them. So that might be something that they need to put on their Christmas list is to have more Magna Tiles, because they definitely don't have enough to make all the things that their little minds want to wander with. And sometimes they just put them in a straight row. So they're just lined up next to each other on the ground, and it's a road for their car to drive down. But again, because each block is its own solid color, you could reduce the complexity by choosing out which colors you have available to your child. Or if having a couple of each color is what's best, and then reducing the rest by getting the rest of the set out of there, or like me, buying the really small set from the get-go, you don't have as many choices that are out there, which makes it a little more visually accessible if the child is able to use their vision to participate. If not, it's still a great tactile activity that they can engage in as well. The soccer ball on the bottom left-hand corner is like a hovering soccer ball, so it would need to be played on a hard surface, I believe. But it lights up, so you could play it in the dark if you want to, but it kind of, unless you hit it, it stays pretty, it's not going to just like move all over the place. And so it's not like you have to chase it down to get to it. But once you've hit it, then it's just like a soccer ball. It's going to move along, and then it's going to slow down and kind of stop and wait for you again. And so I think that's a great way If visually your child wanted to play, it makes it a cool little twist on just a plain soccer ball. Playing, again, just another way to access it, similarly to the goal ball and beeper ball that we talked about earlier. Are any of these things that you guys have or would have interest in? Any other light up things that you guys have seen or used with your kiddos? My kids also have, and I could not find the link for it. My kids have these glow in the dark. It has like a little light on the bottom, and you do have to plug it in to charge it. And you can like smack the top and it changes the colors. They come with a remote too. But my kids loved that at night because the little night light that went into the wall apparently wasn't bright enough. Or if we went up north in Michigan, we might go up to, showing as my map, if we go up to up north up here, they felt like they needed a little bit more light in there. And so those were a great way for them to just feel safe. They're squishy and they could sleep with them. There's no missing pieces or anything like that that would make it unsafe for them to have in their beds with them at night. Michelle mentioned light up ice cubes. Yes, Michelle, I had used that one time with a family wanted to have something in the bathtub and they couldn't figure out what to have. And so I said, why don't you guys have those light up ice cubes? You can actually, they're able to be in liquids. So they put those light up ice cubes in the bathtub for the kiddo to play with, which is really cool. Oh, thank you for sharing the link. That's great. Yes, I've heard lots of really cool things with those. And some families have even used those to just build with and play with as part of sensory play too, which is really cool. Yeah, you play with them on the table. Excellent. That is super cool. Any other light up toys that you guys use? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide, but feel free to, if you're typing, to continue sending it in. Trying to give everyone think time. Oops, what happened to my slides again? Okay. So this next page is about that sensory input. And I think it's important. A lot of times when we think sensory input, I have a lot of people that I work with that will think automatically to just that hands-on tactile input. And so we think of things like water play or the water balloons or Play-Doh and things of that nature. But there are a lot of different types of sensory input. And so we want to make sure that if you have an occupational therapist that you're working with or anyone else on the team that might be able to help you understand the different types of sensory input, that you work closely with them. The PT even might know that a little bit more closely. And you can create like a sensory diet about what's best and what your child needs. So a lot of times in the CVI world, we talk about balancing the vision and the auditory processing and the tactile input that we're giving as far as learning. But when we talk about the needs that our bodies have for sensory input, think about, I'm going to go on a little teaching moment, sorry. When you think about when you're on a swing or going down a slide, part of what makes that feeling for you when you go down like a big hill on a roller coaster, or when you're spinning around, that dizzy feeling comes from that visual input because you're starting to see everything spin around. You get that. And we see that a lot of kids crave that deep, those types of movements a lot. So that's why a lot of kids like to be flung up in the air and caught, and not all kids, but some kids really like those big impact type of movements because it's what their body is craving. And then as you get older, your body is supposed to mature, so you don't crave that as much. But when you don't have the visual inputs to get that from the get-go, especially when you're in that phase 1 realm, your body's not maturing through some of that stuff as fast. And so then later on, when you are using your vision, maybe you're not ambulatory, so you can't move around and spin yourself in circles to get that type of motion, you're missing out on that development of those types of things. So that's why an OT or a PT, someone on your IEP team, could create a sensory schedule for your child to make sure that everything's kind of balanced out and meeting those different needs that their body has. Okay. That being said, some fun toys that would also allow you to meet some of those needs, depending on what your child might have. On the upper left-hand corner is this little sensory pea pod. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I think those are kind of expensive. So there's other ways to create similar things. I've seen some people use some other ideas, but I wanted to share with you, just because I don't know that the sensory pea pod idea is really widely known. I wanted to share with you that actual idea. Feel free to be creative and create your own if you'd like. But those are really nice ways for kids to get that close impact feeling. Another one on the far right is a body sock. And so they're come in different sizes. And what's really cool is they're just fun to kind of like play in and be silly with. So if you have more than one, you can kind of be silly with them, but they really hug your body tight, kind of like different vests and things like that might do. And then on the bottom in the middle, I have an adaptive tricycle. And so maybe if your child doesn't have the ability to hold their body upright, this one could actually strap them in. If they do have that physical ability to hold upright, you wouldn't need of an adaptive tricycle, and you could have one that has the hand on the back. I just love the idea of them pedaling, getting going. If your child is beyond that, look into some of the different balance bikes and things of that nature, so that even beyond pedaling, they could just kind of scoot and balance along. Further from that, you can get some great tandem bikes, and sometimes there's some in your area that you can work with different teams on learning how to tandem ride, because there's actually like, it's not something that's easy to do, but I've seen some of my families do some of the tandem riding and the kids really enjoy it. And so I have never tandem rode with a kid before, but again, talk to the people in the area and see if maybe you could rent them. Maybe that would be another experience gift that you guys could do if that child is ready for that movement. Even if they can just hold themselves up on the bike while you are pedaling, and they don't have to do as much of the pedal motion, but they have the physical ability to hold onto the handlebars and keep themselves on the bike, would be a really cool ride for them to go on. So that kind of covers a little bit of the gamut of physical ability and hopefully participation in something like that for going for a bike ride. Other sensory ideas, kind of thinking more along the lines of what we were talking about before, are just water balloons in general. In the winter here in Michigan, we are actually able to fill the water balloons up, and then I'll put like a little bit of food coloring in them and then put them outside and they'll freeze. And so then the kids, we can take after the water freezes inside of it, we can peel off the actual balloon part of it. And then they just have like a giant ice ball that's different colors, and it looks really fun in the snow. For those of you who aren't as far north, just water balloons in general to save for another day is really fun. And they're just something fun to play with. Water beads, the kind that you let them soak overnight and they get bigger, fun to play with. And you can even put like a box of those over a light box if you have one. Oh, I don't think I mentioned that earlier about the light box. You can get those through APH as well. So if your child is someone who qualifies through those federal quota funds with your school team, that is definitely something that you can look into as well and see if you can get a light box. Mary Ann is asking, what is the name of the beanbag chair you're showing? Oh, that is the sensory pea pod. And oh man, I thought I had the link on there, but maybe I don't. Okay, I can find it again and come back if I need to, Miriam, before we close out the meeting, if you need me to find it. If you haven't seen already, there's those growing tubes that they pull apart and expand and they can make a bunch of noise. I had a bunch of students who absolutely loved those. And that was a teacher gift one year that I gave out to a bunch of my students. Just because they really enjoyed the sound of it growing apart and pushing back together. It encouraged that bilateral hand movement that we were working on. And again, if they didn't have that movement of both hands together, I could use one side and they could hold the other, and it's still engaged in that sound input and that feeling in their hands, which is really cool. You can tell a lot of my stuff, I think, about the development of the child as well as the play aspect, but it's just the educator in me. I guess I'll never get rid of it. Bath toys, like we mentioned earlier with the light up stuff. Bubble bath things are fun little things that you can give. There's Theraputty, which if you're going to get Theraputty, be careful because the different colors have different like tightnesses. So you want to look at, I don't remember what the color spectrum is, but if you're going to look at Theraputty, it's kind of It's like a mix between Play-Doh and slime. It's not as gooey as slime is. But the purpose is to actually get them to work a little bit more with their fingers. And the more that you move it around, I believe it's supposed to get a little bit easier to move. But we used to hide little toys inside it, like little figurines that the kids could peel out and then play with. So maybe you're hiding those light up ice cubes like we talked about earlier, and then they have to kind of like pull the putty apart to get the ice cubes out, and then they can play with the ice cubes as a reward afterwards. Here I go with the development again. Sorry, it's just the name of the game with me. Any other toys or things in general that you've thought of and wanted to share that, I mean, you have to remember there's a lot of people that are joining us today, and even groups that will watch this later, and you might have it and they might have never thought of it, which would be great for their family. So if you've got any other ideas, things that are your child's favorites right now at home that another family might want to try out, please feel free to share those. So this website is called specialneedstoys.com. And I love, they have all these different categories. Now, mind you, it's not going to be for everybody. You know, there's going to be a lot of different age ranges available, but depending on what you're looking for, you might find ideas for different things that your child is working on. Now, some of them are totally reasonably priced and others are super expensive. And so, but if it gives you an idea, you can then go search on Google and somewhere else and see if you can find it. I love these see-through buttons on this page. I thought that would be really cool on the light box. And then if you were working on like stringing beads with your child motorically, if they were working on that type of skill, you could do something like that. They have some great switch adaptive toys, just some really cool ideas. They have noisy puzzles. So again, things like this are available a lot of other places. You could cover up the spot where the puzzle piece goes, and you could cover the whole thing in a solid color if you wanted to, if that background was going to be too much, either using paint or a film over it, but that requires a little bit of modifications on your part. But if you just wanted to do maybe some balance activities, you could go to motor planning and then balance and look and see if there's anything here that might work with your child's needs. Oh, look, there's, you know, some different stones, that the tactile balance stones, and see if that might work. So there's just some really cool different ideas. And like I said, I would take these ideas and go search elsewhere and see if I could find one that would be a little bit more budget friendly as well. So just giving you some ideas from this place. It's called specialneedstoys.com. In fact, I will paste that link here in the chat. And then Fat Brain Toys is another one that will give you some good ideas as well. So they've got a bunch of categories, and it's just a good spectrum of things that you might be able to find some things to make a wish list out of. Hopefully that is helpful for you. Okay, and then I also wanted to address just attending things with a family, because I know everybody's doing things a little bit different because of COVID. And so attending family events might look completely different for everybody, depending on what state you're in and where you're at and how comfortable you are. So I don't really want to get into any of the COVID stuff, but just in general, when you think about attending holiday functions with a child with different needs, it's not always easy to stick to your normal routines, but our kids, they crave those routines. Even kids who are typically developing, my body craves routine. And when I'm not in that routine, it throws me off, and our kids respond the same way. And so it's really important that as much as we can, we stick to that. And there's going to be times where we're just going to have to say, like, hey, I can't go that early because I need to make sure we're, you know, at home for this complete nap first, and then we can go to that function. And that's okay. You have to meet your family's needs. And this is just my opinion first. and so that hopefully when you do get there, you can have a successful day. So hopefully if that means you're coming like an hour late or something, then you're coming an hour late. And hopefully that means when you get there, your child and you will be much more ready to participate in that event and have a successful time. The next thing I have on here is communicating with your family. So some of you might have very supportive families and are completely understanding and are very involved with you and your child, and that's great. And for those of you who aren't, it's an important time to explain to them why we have to stick to routines or what kinds of things we might need in order to be successful in an event. And if you're going to need help when you're there, what would that look like? Is it that you physically need them to be there to help, or is help look like, hey, when we're chatting, I just need you to give us some space for a minute because he might be overwhelmed and I just need to give him time to just sit with me and be quiet. And we don't need to all hug on my child because he's not ready for that. He doesn't need all of that input. And how does your child like to be addressed? Do they want to be in the group and part of the chaos with all the cousins? Or do they prefer to just stick around with you for a little bit? And whatever that looks like, whatever your norm is and whatever is good for you and for your child, that's what you need to do. And it's not always easy. As I say this, I understand that it's not always easy. And I'm hopefully that hearing it from another mom makes it a little bit more empowering to make some of those decisions for yourself and for your family. Remember that no one knows your child better than you do. And you're here in this meeting, or a teacher joining this meeting to hopefully relay that message to those parents that they are the champion for that child. And it's up to them to figure out what works best. As we talked about before, there's special events that are tailored to individuals with special needs. Sometimes they are called Autism Nights. That's okay for your kid to join those too, if you think that the modifications they've made to the environment will work for your kid. It can be really tricky when you have multiple kids. I forget now who it was, but someone said earlier that they had kids in the background and they were doing lots going on, and that's totally understandable too. And siblings of kids with special needs are super amazing, and they oftentimes play a big role in kind of being that champion for their sibling. And so maybe those events that you guys are talking about would be a great time if Aunt is taking your child to an event and doing something that maybe somebody else can do something special with the sibling, so they have a special one-on-one moment with you as well. And most importantly, just breathe, because together as a family, you guys can make it happen. And if you just need another mom to chat with and to talk to, please feel free to email me, and I will be your ear and bounce ideas off for you, or just listen, because that's totally understandable. And I know I have my support team, and I don't know what I would do without them. And if you don't have that in your life and you just need somebody to kind of bounce an idea off of, you can message me on Facebook or email me anytime, and I will be an ear for you, because together as families, we all need somebody to just kind of listen to us sometimes. So breathe, it'll be okay. We can get through it one day at a time together. Okay. Again, I know that could be easier said than done sometimes. If no one else has any other toys or anything that they want to share with us, I want to thank you all for joining us. Hopefully I kept this short and sweet and gave you guys some different ideas and different ways to think about some things. If you're interested, up in the corner of my picture is a QR code, as well as on the screen here. Those both go to my business card, and you're welcome to just hold your camera up to those, and it'll sync my business card right to you. And I will also type in my email into the chat right now. I know sometimes it doesn't let you copy and paste it though, so that's why I put the QR code up for you. if that's easier for you to access my information. Just a reminder, if you haven't heard already, our next live event is going to be on December 15th at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. And in that event, we're going to be discussing some really cool updates to our CViConnect Pro system that we've been making. Our developers have taken a serious effort in learning more about the needs of your kiddos and the amazing people they are. And it has been really fun for me to share that with them. And I cannot wait for you guys to see how excited they are about the changes that they've made and hopefully making it easier for educators and IEP teams to work together to provide better access for our kids. Again, if you need me, there is my that QR code there, links directly to my business card. And I thank you all so much for joining me today.